Today's webinar is entitled Library PI, Process Improvement Library Style, presented by Gina Millsap. Gina is the Chief Executive Officer of the Topeka and Shawnee County Public Library. Over the past 36 years, she's worked in 3 extraordinary libraries in Missouri, Iowa, and Kansas, and has been a library director for 15 years. She's nationally known for presenting on cutting-edge issues, including 21st century librarianship, process improvement, the use of market segmentation to grow and develop library services, and the strategic changes necessary for libraries to thrive in the 21st century. Gina is also currently a candidate for president of the American Library Association. I'm now happy to introduce Gina Millsap.
Thank you, Eileen. Appreciate that. And good afternoon, everyone. I'm so happy to be with you here today. Welcome to Library PI. We'll just call it PI for short. How's that? So PI has lots of meanings, doesn't it? It's a number expressing the ratio of the circumference of a perfect circle to its diameter. That's the math version. It's a pastry. For our purposes today, it stands for process improvement. So I did a little research. According to a recent poll that I made up for this presentation, only 15.3% of librarians use process improvement, but at least 84.7% of librarians eat pie, usually apple, followed by cherry, pecan, pumpkin, and banana cream. So I think I've made my point here. We'll be data-driven throughout this presentation. Here's a little background on my librarian community. In 2001, a beautiful new Michael Graves design building opened, and use of services, collections, programs, and the building increased dramatically. Today, the library houses an art gallery, full-service cafe, a gifts and use bookstore, and is a community gathering place and a cultural center. We serve Topeka and Shawnee County, Kansas. That's about 550 square miles, and we go from urban to very rural. Our population is about 177,000. We have 95,000 customers or members. Our collections over 500,000, and we circulate about 2.5 million items a year. So here's the real library, the people who serve the people of Topeka and Shawnee County. We have 225 staff members, most of whom are full-time. And in terms of service deployment, we're a little unusual. We serve that entire area with 1 building and no branches. But we do have 4 bookmobiles and lots of outreach in the community with plans to do a lot more. Like most other public libraries in the country, we've experienced cuts over the past 4 years. To address revenue shortfalls, we've reduced our staff by 6%. We've cut the book and materials budget by 55%. We've reduced funding for programs like Storytime. We've also sought funding from other sources. And we've initiated user fees. And probably most important for us, we discontinued the free mailing of all books and other materials, which for us was like closing a branch. In spite of these challenges, we've continued to thrive because of the people you see here and their commitment to excellence. That means we're always looking at what we're doing and figuring out how to do it better. And that leads us to today's topic, process improvement. Here's what it is. And this isn't an official dictionary definition, it's just mine. You'll notice a book, The Fifth Discipline by Peter Senge. The subtitle is The Art and Practice of the Learning Organization. And that's important to remember. Libraries are organizations that promote and facilitate lifelong learning, but we don't always incorporate that philosophy or practice into our own operations. Being a learning organization and understanding how to think about the library as a system is fundamental to an understanding of process improvement. Senge's vision of the learning organization focuses on what he calls the 5 disciplines. The 5th discipline, systems thinking, integrates the other 4, and they are, briefly, personal mastery, mental models, building a shared vision, and team learning. Systems thinking is the ability to integrate the important components within an organization and to understand what impact they have on each other. For instance, a commonly used example is a car. All its parts work together. But if a key part is removed, say the alternator, it fails. Pretty simple. Libraries, like all organizations, are the sum of their parts too, like human resources, staff development, circulation, technical services, public services, administration, technology, facilities, etc. If those parts aren't working in harmony, the library doesn't perform as well as it should. So that's a very quick and simple definition of systems thinking with apologies to Dr. Senge. And I really encourage you to take a look at the fifth discipline. It's also important to define process improvement by what it isn't, and here's what it ain't. Process improvement isn't based on anecdotal evidence or one-time occurrences or just feelings and opinions. If too much of that type of information finds its way into the process, your objectivity and even the sense of what is really happening can get lost. The team may end up solving the wrong problem or not recommending improvement that makes a real difference. So now let's talk about how you do it. Just as the definition I gave you was simple in my own, so is the process you see here. It isn't total quality management, also known as TQM, or Sigma 6. Both are pretty complex methodologies for quality and incremental improvement. They require a significant amount of training and in some cases even certification. This is a simple approach to evaluating what we do in libraries and making it better. It isn't rocket science. Anyone can do it. It does take a commitment of time, using data and a few tools, honest evaluation, involving and listening to the staff who do the work, and a willingness to make changes, sometimes radical changes, even when you know they might not be popular, at least at first. So we'll take these steps one by one, but first let's do a quick survey. Which of these situations are occurring in your library? And check all that apply. And we'll give it another few seconds. Okay, and that's 30.
I don't know if you can see the poll coming in, but I'm seeing it's going pretty good here. I'll
close
it here in just a second.
Very good. And actually, I can't see it coming in, but. Okay. So, and I'm having difficulty seeing the results.
Hang on just a second. And
okay.
It's taking a little while to close.
Okay, I'll be patient.
Are you seeing it now?
Okay. Oh, okay. So here's what we're seeing here. A significant number of people are seeing the retirement of veteran employees, equal amount or maybe a little more backlogs or delays, lots of budget cuts. Concerns about quality is actually the winner here. We have some other, and then a few of you evidently are having no problems, and good for you. Okay, this really begins to talk about what triggers a process improvement. But first I have to tell you about this slide. I work with one of our talented marketing staff members, Lisa Coble-Krings, on all the presentations that I do. We storyboard together and confer about images and slide content. Then she designs the graphics and I tell the story. The original picture on this slide was of a horse, but not this horse. So I asked Lisa, oh, is that supposed to be Roy Rogers' horse Trigger? And she said, who? Because Lisa's 30 years old, and I'm not. And it was at that moment that I realized that even my pop culture references are getting old. So if you didn't immediately recognize who that was, my apologies. But that horse's name is Trigger. So this slide is designed to answer the question, what precipitates a PI project? Why would you do one in your library? And here are some of the reasons. It can be staff turnover. It can be the resignation or retirement of a leader, budget cuts, a concern that results from a particular service area aren't the quality they should be. And sometimes in my library, it's me sticking my nose in because I have a concern as the director that a department or service program is struggling, not focused on the library's strategic plan, or perhaps doesn't have the leadership that it needs. And in some instances, these triggers are also symptoms that you have a problem. For example, Is there conflict somewhere in your library? Now, I'm not talking about normal disagreements and different perspectives. Those happen all the time. I'm talking about chronic infighting and fundamental differences about how to get things done. Some management experts say that process accounts for 80% of all problems, people only the other 20%. Sometimes we have good people working in flawed systems. They prevent staff from doing their best work because they haven't been analyzed or changed over time, even though technology and the volume of business may have changed dramatically. And that can cause friction when staff may be working at cross purposes, or they don't have the same vision or goals, or are performing similar tasks but in very different ways and with different results. Next, you have to target your intended goal. What's the focus of this process improvement effort? Is it deciding how a service will change to respond to and anticipate changing user expectations, balancing budget cuts with increasing demands for service, because you can't seem to get caught up and in fact backlogs are getting bigger, deciding if you will replace a longtime manager with a manager, another staff position, or if you'll replace it at all, because you have a great idea for a project but you don't have any money to do it, or maybe you want your friends or foundation to provide more money to support the library. Also, throughout this webinar, if you think of a situation that would benefit from a PI project, please share it through chat. Next, who will facilitate? This person and this function is critical to the whole process. He or she works with management and staff to frame the problem or issue, put the team together, and really guides the process with scheduling, agenda setting, recording, cheerleading, resolving conflict, asking the right questions at the right time, and ultimately building consensus. Libraries have lots of smart, educated people, but it takes strong facilitation to bring smart people together, get them and keep them focused on a goal, and help them to reach consensus in the end. None of us are born knowing how to do this, but we can learn, and we should. I think facilitation training should be part of the curriculum in library school and part of every course in management and leadership. Ultimately, as leaders, we don't have to have all the answers, but we have to ask our staff great questions so that we can find the answers together. Deciding who should be on the team is key. It shouldn't be handled by broadcasting a request for volunteers. Each member should be chosen for his or her knowledge, their skills, and their unique perspective. Once members are chosen, each should receive a personal invitation to be part of the team. Each person should understand that he or she brings something valuable and special to the team. Learning together provides an essential start for any group that must work together to accomplish a goal. There's some simple training exercises that will reinforce this notion, and that the combination of expertise and skills of team members will get better results than any one person by him or herself. And up here on the slide, you see a couple of examples that can be done at a first team meeting. One is a trivia question sheet that team members do individually, and then again as a group. And then they compare scores. In case you're worried about how this turns out, I have never worked with a team when the score of the group working together didn't exceed the average individual score. The cards that you see on the right there with the primary colors and the personality traits are revealing and fun. They are initially distributed to team members who are then encouraged to trade or exchange them if they don't feel the cards they're dealt don't really describe who they are. They then compare their cards to those of their teammates. This demonstrates the unique characteristics of each team member and how each person is needed to complete the team. And just as important, this is fun. There's lots of chatting and laughter as team members discuss answers to trivia questions, search for the personality traits that best describe who they are. And it sets the stage for working together. The realization that working together can be fun and that what they contribute will have unique value to the team. So you've heard of that 500-pound gorilla. Here's ours. His name is BHAG. This, again, with apologies to Jim Collins, author of Good to Great and Built to Last, I use his notion of the BHAG, or Big, Hairy, Audacious Goal. It's developed by the group, and it's a statement of that shared vision that drives the work of the PI team. So what is a BHAG? Collins describes it this way. A BHAG engages people. It reaches out and grabs them in the gut. It is tangible, energizing, highly focused. People get it right away. It takes little or no explanation. So I use it a little bit differently, but the spirit and results are the same. For instance, I begin the BHAG development process with a simple plus-delta analysis. We chart what's going well and identify what we want to improve or change. For instance, the BHAG for our gallery process improvement project, which is in process right now, is we will be the foremost gallery in the world in helping people get art. And they follow that up with their own motto, damn, that's art. And here's a brand new one from the Special Collections PI group at my library. Special Collections will connect people to their stories by being the best, first, and most accessible choice for genealogy and local history. And note that part of the facilitator's job is to help the group articulate and develop criteria for what is meant by phrases like getting art or connect people to their stories. Once you have your BHAG, you have to understand the environment you're in. Sometimes it's primarily the library, although I urge you to always extend your thinking beyond your own institution. Sometimes it's the community. Sometimes it's much bigger. It's types of libraries or industries that offer services that are similar to ours. Who else does this or something comparable? Who does it better than anyone else? Are there industry best practices? Is there competition? What other events or actions may affect what you're working to improve? What new developments might influence how you evaluate and make decisions about this issue or service? And it starts with asking questions. Another way to think of this is an audit. So an audit is not just a financial tool. It's essentially the identification and evaluation of a person, an organization, a system, process, enterprise, project, whatever. And note that this isn't in depth. It's intended to be broad and sweeping and to provide context for the rest of the process. Next, you need to establish a baseline of where you are right now. Many times developing a visual like a map is very helpful in seeing what's really happening versus what any one person thinks is happening. The diagram in the upper right-hand corner, the one with colors, is an example of a process map. It's a map showing the steps involved in searching for and retrieving titles that are requested by library customers. It's one of many we did when we were doing an analysis of our reserve system. Maps are developed by interviewing the people who do the work and observing them at work. Mapping what you currently do helps identify bottlenecks, duplication, inconsistencies, and activities that may not contribute to the progress or completion of the process. And remember your BHAG. You now have a goal developed by and agreed to by the team to test your current process against. A key question you must ask is what we're currently doing getting us closer to the BHAG, or is there a better way? And speaking of a better way, Shakespeare said, "We know what we are, but not what we may be." The purpose of our PI project is to discover what we may be, what the great possibilities are, decide what we're shooting for, and then taking action to get there. Once you've established what you're doing and how well you're doing, you have to set the standards that help you reach your BHAG. The goal standard must be concrete, and like your BHAG, it must be ambitious and maybe even a little bit scary. Underlying the development of this goal standard must be a desire and determination to be the best. Don't underestimate your ability to do great work. And be mindful of what Jim Collins says, good is the enemy of great. Once you have your gold standard, you must articulate what this better future looks like. How will things be better, be the best as you strive for that higher standard? Here's where it gets concrete. Precisely what results are you devoting your efforts to? And they have to be measurable so you'll know when you get there. Here's an example from my library's process improvement project for our art gallery. The gallery will be open all the hours that the library is open. Okay, and that's coming from a situation in which the gallery is currently closed several weeks of the year for exhibit preparation and other activities. Now it gets even more concrete and detailed. The team must develop its to-do list based on the measurable outcomes it has defined. Frequently at this point, you may want to do some experimenting before you introduce wholesale change into the system. If it's feasible, consider a pilot project. You know, sometimes that doesn't work. Sometimes you just have to do it, as Nike says. But if you're considering a big change with a lot of moving parts, a pilot can help work out the problems and the kinks. Here's an example of a to-do list or a task list. At my library, we call them work plans. It's very simple. We use Excel to document the goal or BHAG is meant to fulfill, the special project it's associated with, the specific action that will take place, the time frame, who is responsible, and then a status column where we track progress and note other key information like, hey, we need a way to fund this. Work plans are reviewed weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly to track progress and make sure things are getting done. We use this phrase a lot at my library, organize around the work. So what does that really mean? It's redesigning the organization and reallocating staffing and other resources based on the work. Libraries are using the same organizational structures we've used for 100 years. They don't always work well anymore, but we continue to use them and allow individual departments to silo within our libraries. So here's an example. One of the most effective ways we've organized around the work is with our digital branch. That's our website. 4 years ago, we formed the Creative Group. It's a team comprised of our digital services or IT staff, our web designer and programmer, and our marketing and communications staff. We're repurposing the original content we're creating on our digital branch in our print publications so that we're leveraging the investments staff members are making in their blog posts and gaining a wider audience for the information they're sharing and the great stories they're writing. That's one result from this new team. It has also allowed us to integrate print and digital communication. That means the design work done and editorial decisions made by the Creative Group are used in both environments. And it continues to grow and evolve. We facilitated the working relationship between the Creative Group and all of our staff who need marketing and communication services. Any library staff person is welcome to participate in the group's Wednesday morning meetings. Finally, it's a win-win for staff and customers. We have staff members all over the library engaged in the creation of original content and developing relationships with customers, and our customers receive a consistent message in print, online, and in all forms of social media. Once you've determined what you're going to do and organizationally how you're going to do it, you have to apply the resources. Resources are focused on achieving the specific outcomes that the team has defined. Resources get the work done. Essentially, that means money, stuff, space, and last but most importantly, staff. This isn't easy, but it's inspiring, and it allows staff to do their best work. And when you do it right, it works. Process improvement means making things better. It's not fighting fires. Its goal is not to blame people for problems or failures. It's simply a way of looking at how we can do our work better. When we take a problem-solving approach, we often never get to the root causes because our main goal is to put out that fire. But when we engage in PI, we seek to learn what causes things to happen, and then we use that knowledge to reduce inconsistencies, remove activities that have no value, get better results with the same or less effort, and improve employee and customer satisfaction. And it also inspires and energizes staff. It encourages innovation. It brings out talents and expertise you never knew were there. It facilitates effective problem solving. It increases productivity. It promotes employee engagement and ownership, and it rewards doing the right thing. So, what kind of stuff do you need to do this? Well, for the most part, I go low-tech when I'm facilitating a process improvement team. I consider my essential tools to be a flip chart and some markers. It's essential to capture the discussion, recommendations, discoveries, and decisions of the team and report those back out after each meeting, along with the agenda for the next meeting. Now, for me, essential software is MindJet, which helps us create process maps. There's lots of software that does this. I like MindJet because we use it as a digital kind of thinking out loud tool. And that outline for process improvement that you saw at the beginning on the gray background, that was done on MindJet. So here's another quick survey. This is about data. This is one of the tools. What data do you use in your library for analysis and decision making? And check all that apply. We'll give you a few seconds to do that.
Gina, it'll end in about 15, 20 seconds.
All righty. So another few seconds.
Okay, they should be up.
Okay, so let's take a look at what we have here. How are we using data? Collection statistics, those are our traditional outputs, certainly the dollars that we have to spend. Some census information, community surveys, good. Not as much industry data, but some of that, and national data for libraries. Some data from social media, and then some specialized data, and I'd be curious to know what that specialized data is. If there's an opportunity, I'd love to know what else you're using and what makes that unique. I would venture to say that no matter how much, most of us don't use data enough, but that's a good start. Remember, so here's the data. Here's some examples. Remember that process improvement, we said, isn't based on I think or I feel. It must be data-based as much as possible. So start with what you've got, which we do. By far, most of us are using our collection statistics. We get those from our ILS systems. Those are our outputs. That could be circulation stats, it might be door counts, it might be wait times for services, hours of computer use. Whatever is relevant to the service or issue you're trying to improve. After that, you then determine what other data you need, and the kicker is sometimes you're not collecting that data. So sometimes you actually have to stop the process and develop a survey or other tool to collect the data that you need. So on this slide up here, what you're seeing is two other types of data. You can see that we have a pie chart for circulation, but at my library we also use market segmentation. The map on the really colorful map on the left shows that there are 31 market segments in Topeka and Shawnee County, and all of them have different consumer buying habits and characteristics. So we now know a lot more about not just who's using the library, but also who isn't using the library. And the other one is one of the process maps that we talked about earlier. There's primarily three types of tools that I use in process improvement: strategy tools, problem-solving tools, and decision-making tools. There's a bajillion tools you can use for virtually all aspects of the process. Don't overuse them. The key to good facilitation is knowing when a tool will help the team think, discuss, evaluate, and decide. Now, the logo you see there in the left-hand corner is for a site called Mind Tools. There's lots of them out there, but I found it to be valuable in finding tools that are a good fit for particular teams. Some of the information there is free and some of it is fee-based. Now, by far the one I use the most is, see that plus delta in the upper left-hand corner of this slide, is the Ultra Simple Plus Delta. It's a two-column list developed by asking the questions, what is going well and what do we want to investigate and or improve? And here's a closer look at some of the other decision-making tools I find useful. Force field analysis, again, very easy to use, and this action priority matrix, which allows you to decide what direction you might go or what strategy you might adopt by how much effort it takes, and what the impact will be. It's also called an effort impact chart. Decision-making can get a little contentious sometimes, and so this is where the judicious use of tools can really be helpful. Tools that help the group reach consensus should be in every facilitator's toolkit. And sometimes the best tools for PI are the ones you make yourself. Here's two tools that we designed. On the right is what we call the creative brief. It facilitates our process for determining what kind of marketing and promotion we'll do for services and programs. Anyone who does programming at the library or does an initiative of the program works with marketing and communications on this brief at the very beginning of the project. And on the left, we have a service plan tool. It outlines the goals and outcomes for what we call neighborhood librarians. They lead teams of staff who are converting our collections to what we're calling neighborhoods. They also coordinate programs, marketing, merchandising, and act as community liaisons. And this plan incorporates all of those activities. It also serves as a performance evaluation tool. So here's a real-life example. This was a large PI project with a working group of 15 to 20 library staff, Friends staff, and Friends volunteers. We met weekly over 9 months. That's a long time. This was an extended process because it took longer to develop and educate the team, establish goals, and reach a point where we could make decisions together. And it all started at the Friends annual book sale when various Friends volunteers came to me and asked for help. They were having disagreements that were degenerating into personality clashes, really, about how to do the weekly task associated with the annual book sale. At first, they asked me just to help them figure out a better book sorting process, but it quickly went beyond that to examine their 3 lines of business. Their annual book sale, think of it as a wholesale outlet, the boutique, which is their used books and gift store in the library, that's their retail outlet, and what was at the time a new venture, online sales. Now, this was my first substantive PI project, and I learned a lot. I learned the importance of process mapping, the importance of using data and not allowing anecdotal evidence or opinion to sway the group, how important it was for everyone at the table to participate and be heard, and the critical need for a clearly stated goal, and how essential good facilitation is, knowing when to question, when to circle back to data, and when to push the group to make a decision. The BHAG was a simple one. The Friends will organize their operations to make the most money for the library. And I told the Friends that my quote-unquote hidden agenda was simple. Given the commitment of space and staff resources the library was devoting to Friends efforts, I wanted a commitment of at least $100,000 annually from them, which was an increase at that time of $40,000 a year. And they agreed enthusiastically. As they worked their way through the process, they began to realize they could do it. Now, this is where we started. This was our first map for the sorting process. I did the first iteration on a flip chart with a group identifying each step, and it took some time. You'll see that there are 4 arrows circling back to the beginning of the sorting process. That's because they were sorting individually for each line of business rather than doing one coordinated sort for all 3 lines of business. That sorting process really reflected how divided and conflicted the system was. If you sorted for the book sale, you didn't sort for the boutique or online sales. They saw themselves as competitors, and they competed for books rather than determining which business channel was likely to have the best return on a book. Now, here's the cool thing. The second I finished that first draft on the flip chart, they all saw how dysfunctional and redundant the sorting process was. It was like, oh, now I get it. We could have talked until we were blue in the face, but once it was on paper and the group agreed that the diagram represented how it actually worked, they could see why they were getting in each other's way and why they were getting behind. And here's where we ended. With one sorting process and one group of volunteers doing the initial sorts for all 3 lines of business. Supporting this were a number of workflow changes, reorganizing space, simplifying the categorization of books, making sure, making sure the pricing of books was consistent, using scanners to determine what books would sell online, reorganizing and retraining volunteers, Each of these issues had to be evaluated and discussed and weighed to determine if they would actually help us make progress towards our BHAG. We also determined how many books the Friends would have to sell in each line of business to net $100,000 to the library. And you saw the results in that first slide. Within a few months, the Friends were making more money. They were also handling more books because their workflow was logical and efficient. Volunteers and staff understood what was expected. They were using technology appropriately, and they had a system that worked smoothly instead of 3 processes that were in conflict. In 18 months, they went from handling 100,000 books to almost 200,000 books, and they proudly presented the library with $100,000 for fiscal year 2012. They are awesome. Here are some other PI projects that have been completed or are currently in process. For reserves, we've seen significant improvements in employee productivity, the reduction of time spent on processing, and just getting stuff to customers in a more timely way and notifying customers in a more timely way. For the foundation, we have seen better results with the annual campaign, even while reducing FTE, and that was also based on developing not just a strategic plan, but a fund development and business plans. The others are currently in process, but in each case, the groups are already working together more effectively because they're talking to each other. They're talking about making the process better, and they're focused on a common goal, that BHAG. Once people see that it's the process, not the people, that's causing the conflict, problem solving becomes much more objective and productive. No finger pointing, or certainly less finger pointing. Now here's my philosophy of facilitation. It's about working with a group of committed, smart people by asking great questions that stimulate solid analysis, innovative thinking, and taking the right actions. The facilitator's other big job is keeping the team focused on its BHAG. Discussions and decisions must help make progress and ultimately achieve the BHAG. Great ideas or efforts that don't do that have to be put aside sometimes. It's easy for teams with creative ideas and energy to get sidetracked or have their efforts derailed if someone isn't holding their feet to the fire with the BHAG, and that's the facilitator's job. Here's a facilitation guide that I found very helpful. It's Michael Wilkinson's The Secrets of Facilitation, and I confess it's my personal favorite. I also recommend, as kind of a starter guide, his Secrets of Masterful Meetings. That's a great starting place for anyone working in libraries, whether you run meetings or are part of meetings. Planning, organizing, and managing meetings is the foundation of good facilitation. And let's face it, we run our libraries on our meetings. When people say to me, meetings are a waste of time, that's not real work, I say, well, maybe your meetings aren't, but that's where I get my work done. Certainly facilitation training is important, but the only way I know to get really good at it is to do it, and to do it frequently. The last part of the process isn't really the end. It's a beginning, because you've now begun this cycle of reviewing, revising, and refocusing your efforts. The good news is that once you do this, it gets easier the next time. Adjustments and changes become more incremental and less drastic. It becomes a way of thinking and working. If you're really successful, as we've been with our friends, they adopt and own PI and are constantly challenging themselves to be better and to do better. But here's a cautionary note. Process improvement can succeed brilliantly or it can fail miserably. Here are some key elements to consider as you determine how you want to improve and evolve your library. This is my office in this slide. Currently, I'm facilitating most of the PI projects in my library. That will change this year as we train more staff to be facilitators, because now that staff see the difference they make, they're lined up for them. We have requests for probably 5 more. Staff informal leadership must be facilitators. Providing support is not enough. I believe that we have to lead this effort by modeling the way as facilitators. Now, this doesn't mean other staff can't do this. There are staff all over the library that will probably be great at this. It just means that formal leadership should do it, and we should do it first. You have to assess your organizational culture. There has to be a can-do spirit and a sense of determination. It is possible to improve your processes and results with your main investment being staff time. It may not be an outlay of money, but sometimes you have to spend a little money to get more resources. Lack of money may be a fact, but it doesn't have to be the excuse. And I will apologize for that last slide. It actually has an effect on it, which says we refuse to allow money to be the reason we don't move forward, and we just couldn't show that. So now you know. Work your process. Now, this process isn't written in stone, and actually I adapted and customize it for every group that I work with, and you should do the same. But you have to have a clearly outlined process and follow it. You should also publish your agendas and notes. Share what your team's doing throughout the library so you begin to educate your organization about how process improvement works and why it's important. Failing to include employees who do the work, use data appropriately, and make good decisions that are objective and transparent will compromise your results and hurt the credibility of your project. Process improvement is always customer focused. Over half of the strategies in my library's strategic plan are internal process improvements. They're priorities because when we improve the employee's ability to do his or her work, service to customers is improved. If the goal is to make things easier for employees at the expense of library users, you will fail. Everyone must understand what the end game is. There's a balance between the context of the big picture, the mission and vision of the library, and the specific aims of your big, hairy, audacious goal. Good process improvement has the view from 5,000 feet, along with that more microscopic perspective that gets things done. And finally, remember that we make the difference. Money, great collections, beautiful buildings, trendy programs, and cool technology are wonderful, and they help make the library, help make our users happy and satisfied with their library experience. But when they have a story to share, they want to talk about their experiences with their librarians, with us. We have a responsibility to our users and to each other. It's part of the job to evaluate what we're doing and determine how we can do it better. Process improvement can help us do better so we can focus on the people who need us to help make their lives better. And at the end of the day, that's why we're here. And with that, I'll say thank you and stand for questions.
If anybody has questions, please type them into text chat now.
And did we have anybody who was contributing some other ideas about areas for improvement or PI projects?
Not so far, but that would be another thing to type into the text chat, everybody.
Yes, I'm always interested in what other people are thinking.
And I also typed into text chat the names of the books that you mentioned.
Oh, great.
Great.
Okay.
Here's one. Do you ever consider the non-data info? And if so, when and how?
Yes, but that depends on what that non-data info is. Stories and anecdotal information, if you collect it and look at it in the aggregate, can be very useful. People's experience and expertise is very useful. It just needs to be balanced with data. It can't be one exclusively or the other. And I want to be sure that that answers the person's question.
Well, maybe if that doesn't give you the answer, type anything you would like to get fleshed out into text chat. And she says yes.
Okay, very good.
What skills do you need to facilitate the process improvement?
You have to be a good listener. You have to be able to listen. You know, some sources say that facilitators have to be absolutely objective. That may be true of people that come in from the outside to facilitate. The reality is if we're facilitating processes within our own libraries, there's no way we can be totally objective. But what we have to do is put aside any preconceived notions we have. Because here's what I found. Every time I go into a process thinking I know what the outcome's going to be, I've been wrong. And actually, I've been delighted to be proven wrong. But it happens so often because you get better results or different results than you thought that you really have to go in understanding that you need to let the process reveal what the improvement needs to be. I also think you have to enjoy working with groups of people. You have to really, as you're listening and recording what people say, and really not paraphrasing what they say, but capturing their exact words, you also have to be able to then take that information back to the group and help them think it through, circle back. You are kind of the keeper of the record, because in some of these processes, they'll be fairly extended, there'll be great conversations, there'll be a lot of good information recorded, and part of the job as the facilitator, it's really kind of a librarian role, is making sure that all of that good information and those decisions continue to be part of the process.
Okay, and we have two questions that are related to friends groups. What's the first thing to do to start a friends group, and then what information do you need for a friends group?
Well, actually, there are some great resources for starting a friends group. I could tell you, but actually the American Library Association has a division that is specifically devoted to Friends Foundation and trustees, and they actually have a how-to manual on that. And I would just go to the website. There's lots of great information there, kind of a step-by-step. This is how you go about it. I'd also be happy to have an offline conversation with the person who's asking that question if you just want some, kind of, this is how we did it here. And the other part of that question, Eileen, again, was?
What information do you need for a friends group?
In terms of starting one or improving one?
This is from Fran Adams. Fran, if you have some more information, you could type it into text chat. That would be great. While she does that, here's another question. What should the director do when younger and more innovative librarians plan while leaving out older librarians?
Well, I think that's why it's important to have the process outlined and an understanding that these teams, well, if you're doing process improvement, for instance, that balance, a good balance of experience and, and some of the less veteran folks is the best. Because anytime you have one perspective exclusively, it's not going to give you the full picture or the full spectrum. It's really important not to underestimate our colleagues, either because they're inexperienced or because maybe the perception is they've been around too long. Again, every time I've done that, I found I've been wrong. There are all kinds of hidden expertise and talents that may never have shown themselves before, and they make an appearance in a team effort like this. And part of the role of the facilitator is to bring that out.
Okay, thanks. Here's another one. How do you respond with colleagues who either want to rush the process or skip it altogether because it's not real work?
Yeah, it's kind of that thing about I don't like meetings, because that's not real work. The reality is if you don't do the work and work the process, your results are going to be crap. I mean, I'm sorry to be so blunt about it, but you know what? Doing the right thing is rarely the easy thing. And the same is true of process improvement. If you want good results, then you have to have a good process and you work it. I mean, I think, quite frankly, I mean, I am happy to tell people, you know what? That's being lazy and we don't do that in this organization. Because ultimately our customers deserve the best.
Yeah. What leadership style is most effective? Do you need to be a charismatic leader?
I don't think of it that way as much as a facilitative leader. I think that great leaders, it's that Jim Collins quote I loved is, good leaders kind of tell you what to do. Great leaders ask the great questions, and you figure it out together. Because sometimes I don't have all the answers. I don't have to have all the answers. Somebody in my library has an answer, and has the best answer. And we figure that out together. And my job is to make sure that person is heard and that answer is found. So I would say facilitative leadership.
Okay, and then here's one. Any advice for small libraries? We have a staff of 16, so our teams will be small. We also have staff who cling to, but we've always done it this way.
Absolutely. I mean, and you know what? I don't care how much people want to see things better. Once you start actually talking about change, people start digging their heels in because all of a sudden they realize, oh my God, this is really going to happen. Well, that's not good. I'll have to change something. You know, I mean, we're all like that. I think human beings are wired to be that way. I also think that with smaller libraries, actually in some ways you've got an advantage because you're going to have, your staff overall is going to have a much better big picture view, but at a macro and a micro level than some of us that are in bigger systems where we might not have any experience with certain aspects of library operations. I think just given the very pragmatic logistics of keeping the desk staffs and keeping the phone answered and the building open and all that kind of thing, your teams will have to be smaller. But all the more reason to have a really well planned out process with every meeting counting. And that just takes time, and the facilitator really needs to really coordinate that.
Here's one. What do you do to improve process when the only thing to improve is held back by old leadership?
Well, first I think that make sure that perception that you have is really true. I found that in libraries, one of the things, and this is not directed at this individual, so please do not take this as a negative. I'm saying this generally. Our profession overall, and I've certainly heard this from people outside our profession, one of the hallmarks of our behaviors is passive-aggressive behavior. And people kind of laugh when I say that, but it's because we're so darn nice. You know, so what I found is that if I have a perception about something, the first thing I do is check it with the person that I have the perception about. Sometimes a direct conversation can be one of the best things you can do to really establish what is the real situation here. And then if that really is the case, if there's reluctance on the part of formal leadership to engage in that, that is going to be problematic. It doesn't mean you can't proceed, but it's going to stack the deck against you. And I just have to be honest about that. You know, you saw that that's one of the criteria for success, because I truly believe that formal leadership doesn't just support this and say, oh yeah, this is a good idea, go ahead and do it. We lead that effort. That's how we mind our shops. So here's what I would say to you. If that's not going to happen in your library, maybe you're in the wrong library.
Okay. It was an interesting question, though. Here's another one. Does this model apply to academic libraries? And if so, how does your model apply?
Well, I have not actually used it in an academic library, but yes, I would say it does. I mean, the fundamental steps should be the same. It doesn't mean that you won't adapt it, but there's nothing in this process, in the overall steps, that would not work in a school library, an academic library, or really, not even in a library, in any organization.
I think, what if confrontation or consultation is not encouraged, lest you get fired?
That's a problem too. Well, I think that then before you engage in a process improvement project, there needs to be, as much as possible, an open, honest discussion about, a lot of that is driven by fear. None of us like conflict. None of us like confrontation. But that's the conversation that needs to occur first is, okay, we want to improve some things, and there's bound to be disagreements. So let's agree ahead of time how we're going to handle those. Again, that's where really good facilitation comes in, and laying the groundwork for a team. And part of teaming, I didn't really get into this. I mean, there are so many of these elements that we could spend a whole hour on just that, which sometimes is a little frustrating, I know. But you know, part of a team's forming and storming, which is learning to work together as a team, recognizing that if we value diversity, that automatically implies different perspectives and different ideas. And the goal ultimately is to really utilize those to best effect and not be threatened by them, or not to shut them down. And that requires frank discussion and decisions about how are we going to do this.
And here's one in text chat. Given budget cuts and need for cross-training to meet project goals and deadlines, how do you deal with staff who have a "it's not in my job description" attitude?
First of all, I think it's really important to be sure that the library is setting very clear expectations for staff. And the reality is, it's in all of our job descriptions. But the first thing to do is set the expectations. Make sure staff, mentoring and coaching staff to be sure that they feel prepared to take on, especially if it's a new task or project, and then really making sure that you're tracking performance and holding staff to those expectations. And I think that's where a lot of times this breaks down. It takes a lot of time and energy and commitment to develop expectations for staff, have regular check-ins, do the mentoring and coaching, offer additional training as needed, and then if the person is simply unable or unwilling to perform, to either deal with it in a disciplinary fashion, or ultimately, if it simply is not working, as my friend Pat Wagner says, help that person gracefully and humanely exit the organization. And literally, there has to be a commitment to do that.
Okay. How can PI work in a large public system, 35 individual branches, without having a PI team that's too large? On any PI team, you have to have enough of a complement of people who actually do the work to really get the best sense of whatever project or initiative or operation you're trying to resolve. It also is helpful to have somebody who has no clue, and actually that's the advantage of working in a big system, and that you're going to have people working in your library that have no clue what circulation does, for instance. And there is an advantage to that because they can ask questions or see things in ways that the people who do the work every day cannot. So I would suggest that in the advantage of that big system is building teams where you've got a balance of people that are closely connected to what you're looking at and people that are not connected at all to what you're looking at. Does that answer the question? I mean, we can have another offline. I mean, that would be a really interesting thing to design, but I'd really want to talk about specifically, let's talk about what you want to improve and then how we would form that team. Well, Barbara, who asked that question, you can get Gina's email and possibly continue that conversation. Oh, yeah, let's have a back and forth. That would be fun. Yeah. Here's another one. What are the disadvantages of engaging in process improvement as a younger employee, like just out of library school? The only disadvantages, it's a great learning experience. The only disadvantages I can see is that you might not have the experience or the expertise of some of your fellow teammates. But that's okay. I think that as long as everybody understands that and values you for what you bring, because what we're finding is at one time we had 18 of our employees that were somewhere in process of getting their MLS. And we have a lot of folks whose library degrees are significantly newer than mine, which is ancient, you know. I mean, I got my degree from the University of Missouri in 1977, you know, for God's sakes. It's an antique. So what I find is that having somebody right out of library school is frequently really valuable in terms of a perspective that we simply haven't had before. And I think that that's how you approach it. Don't feel, you know, that you're operating at a disadvantage because you don't have a lot of library experience. Draw on what you've learned through education to really add value to the process. Well, I think we have reached, we've gotten through all the questions, and we are now at the top of the hour. So I would like to thank Gina very much for a very informative webinar. I put the link to the Starting a Friends group from the ALA website in the text chat,
Wonderful.
and we will have a transcript of the text chat up on the website. So all the links that have been input into text chat will be there. So I wanted to thank Gina, and thank you all for attending, and hope to see you at the next webinar.
Thanks, everybody.